Back to the top story we're following this hour. The government has once again deported controversial lawyer Miguna after a 3-day standoff at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where he had been denied entry into Kenya. Immigration officials put Miguna on an Emirates airline flight codenamed EK722 to Dubai, which took off from the JKIA at 19 minutes past 11 last night. That plane was scheduled to land at the Dubai International Airport at 5:05 this morning. Emirates airline flight EK722 was initially to depart from the JKIA at 11:15. That was last night. It was delayed for about 35 minutes, presumably to facilitate Miguna's deportation. It remains unclear how Miguna was made to board that plane, given that he vigorously fought off a previous attempt to force him onto a plane out of JKIA on Monday night. Miguna is said to have calmly boarded Emirates flight EK722, and so far there's been no official statement on the incident from his lawyers. His social media accounts as well, that earlier indicated he was being held inside a toilet at JKIA's Terminal 2, have also not been updated. His deportation came hours after High Court Judge George Odunga ordered that he be produced before court. Yes, once again, what do we know so far with regard to this deportation? The plane left JKIA at 19 minutes past 11 p.m. No official statement from lawyers or immigration department. His social media has not been updated. That is, Miguna's social media has not been updated since 5 p.m. The only message we have from him is what I read out earlier, a text sent to some members of NASA, and we'll be looking at that in a short while as well. According to reports, Miguna boarded the plane calmly, which raises questions given the fact that he vigorously fought off previous attempts to make him board another Emirates airline flight on Monday night. Flight EK722, initially scheduled to leave the JKIA at 11:15, was delayed for about 35 minutes and departed at 19 minutes past 11. It was to arrive at Dubai International Airport at 5:05 this morning, meaning that yes, it's about an hour and a half since that plane landed in Dubai, and we do have that message once again from Miguna. Let me read it out again. I was drugged, assaulted, and forcefully into Dubai. I woke up in Dubai and the despots are here insisting that I must travel on to London. I am sick. I need medical treatment. Mr. Nje here is threatening me. I need urgent help here. I want to take a flight only to Nairobi. I'm now joined in studio by George Keithy, a lawyer, Joseph Simeha, NASA strategist, and Gabriel Muduma, Jubilee Party strategist. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. We want to discuss other headlines, but we have a very big headline this morning. This deportation.
A headline that is not on the...
Yes, and most of the dailies are struggling to fit that headline anywhere, because by the time they go to press, which is about 10 p.m. at night, this had not happened yet. Now Miguna, as we say. And let's start off with you, Bwana Joseph Simeha, because you do appear to have some information with regard to Miguna's state as we speak. That message was sent directly to your phone?
Not to my... Well, it was shared on a group of which a number of us are, so not just to me alone.
So are you certain that this is from Miguna?
Yes, absolutely.
How certain are you? Because, we want to avoid a situation where we're reading out just a message.
No, obviously, I wouldn't be careless as to, you know... It would
just reassure the public that this is a genuine message.
No, we are on several groups together, and I have his number, at least one of his numbers, on which he communicates regularly. He's been updating us on that very same number when he was going through this ordeal at the airport, so I wouldn't be forwarding something to you that is not authentic.
Is this the only communication you've had from him since yesterday?
Since yesterday, that's the only communication I've seen from him.
So he wasn't able to communicate during that time that he was being deported, he was being made to board the plane, or even during the flight? Probably he did not communicate, because the last communication, at least on his social media handles, was at 5 p.m. yesterday.
It would appear so that he wasn't in a state to communicate. If that message, let's assume that, you know, what he's telling us is the truth, and between the people who are handling him and him, I would believe him, that they dragged him, then rather dragged him, like, you know, possibly sedated him or whatever, used whatever drug, put him on the plane against his will, so and transported him to Dubai. So he came in Dubai, according to him.
Okay.
And now they were forcing him again to travel further on to London. Wow. So it would appear that he was not in a state, or he was not able to communicate.
Okay, so according to that message, the destination was not really Dubai. That was just the initial destination, but for him to be put on an onward flight to London. But initially, George, we saw the court orders being issued. All these things we are made to understand, because now it's coming out that a lot of this travel requirements, Kenyans are getting a new understanding of them. We are made to understand that he did not even have his Canadian passport by the time he was being held at the airport. Probably had given it to one of his friends to go with it. So when you deport someone like that who has no Kenyan passport, has no Canadian passport, he says he's Kenyan, then you deport him to Dubai, then to London. How does that work?
Well, I believe that the detail as to how they had planned to execute his entry into the country has different facets to it. But what's emerging as prominent is that when he arrived in the country, he did not want to execute his entry with paperwork that will be pegged on or based on his Canadian passport, for obvious reasons that he, one, claims that he's Kenyan, and number two, because processing himself will be admission that he is a Canadian citizen. I think it's how this first was handled in its execution. Because, you see, he's not coming here because of a Canadian passport or a Kenyan passport. It's pursuant to a court order. And I do think even processing him or not processing him is basically a documentation of sorts to show that he has come into the country pursuant to...
So that court order overrides any other travel document that he has?
It does, because you see, what happens ordinarily is that a seamless entry would involve all those processes that are there. But because a court order superimposes itself in the circumstances, when you get there, I don't think the Canadian passport or a Kenyan passport will deny or afford him entry. It is the court order that affords the person entry. Okay. Now, this is because the whole situation is being handled by a court process. So, whether he was having a Kenyan passport or a Canadian passport is neither here nor there. What is important is he's coming to the country pursuant to an order of a court which he has an obligation he himself to obey, and the person who are processing and handling him, they themselves have obligations to respect and obey that court. When he comes to court, then he's in the jurisdiction of the court. The court will process him accordingly. And by the way, a court can summon you and order that you be charged. And that's a possibility. Because of the fact that, first is that the first and foremost, the orders of the court bringing him for purpose of being heard comes first. And anyone, you see, the Constitution is not meant for a Kenyan alone. The Constitution is meant for anyone within the jurisdiction of Kenya. So a foreigner who is in this country, who disobeys the law, will be summoned and if possibly forced to be in Kenya pursuant to an order of court. Then he'll be processed as should be within the process of law. So Kenyan, being Kenyan or Canadian is neither here nor there.
Now this issue of deportation, because initially we saw him being deported directly to Canada because it is assumed he is a Canadian citizen, he holds a Canadian passport. But in the last 2 days or so we see and we saw reports him described as an undocumented individual. So what do you do to an undocumented individual? Do you now just deport him to any country that you think of?
I think for purposes of the Kenyan situation, he's undocumented because then Kenya and authorities hold that he is not a Kenyan because of the preceding events of obtaining a Canadian passport in the last dispensation of the Constitution and not the current Constitution. That then becomes an arguable issue. I do say that although that is arguable, it has its own faces and facets in the circumstances. However, because of the fact that he holds a Canadian passport and that's in the public domain, and that is in fact a fact, and he has traveled with it before, and in fact all the tickets have been issued pursuant to that clearance as a holder of a Canadian passport and therefore a Canadian citizen, then processing him, returning him where he should go will be to return him to Canada.
Not to Dubai or London or any other place.
He should have been taken, I think it's either en route to Dubai, en route to Dubai, but the last destination should be Canada inevitably.
Well, last week we were talking about things that could get messy, noisy. This one, I think, is the noisiest, probably. This is the messiest. This government has gotten itself into a very murky situation that many people are saying, like, it was unnecessary, it was uncalled for. How big is Miguna for it to create such a big problem that no one is talking about anything else in Kenya right now?
And you know, Fred, I argued the very same thing when Miguna arrived. And I was like, why don't we, you know, why does he not just follow the road just like everybody else? You know, why the extra drama? Because when you look at the grand scheme of things, we are told Miguna left Canada, went to London. In fact, we are told that he was grilled in London for some hours before he was let in. And, you know, having a Canadian passport, you know, does not set you up for strict, you know, visa measures. So he was let in. Further on, he extended his trip to Dubai, and then he came to Nairobi, all while using a Canadian, you know, travel document. When he comes to Nairobi, I was wondering, why could he not have presented that? And I remember the first day we were looking at a clip with him and his lawyer, Julie Soweto, going back and forth. And you could see even at one point he started talking to Julie and said, I will not accept your advice. I will not go with what you're telling me. So here you're talking about somebody who has actually even refused to accept counsel. Then we saw the government come in. The forms that Wakili is talking about were presented to him. We are also told that the government went ahead and actually even offered a courtesy visa. So if all this has been offered to you, extended to you, a visa that's only reserved for dignitaries, why don't you want to take this if really your core issue is to get passage, you know, legally into the country? So, I mean, you're right, it's unnecessary drama, and I do not know.
Even on the part of, on the part of state agencies.
Yes, but I'm looking at it this way. From the immigration officer seated at that desk, what would you do? What would you do? Unless you're telling me, Fred, just allow him free access to the country. Now, international laws, yeah, and I agree, you know, to an extent what Wakili has said. But I'm telling you, look at it from the immigration officer point of view. And I mean, we've tried dissecting this. Yes, it's unnecessary drama, but this is one thing that would have been sorted the very same hour Miguna arrived.
Okay, but Miguna obviously refused to give to follow the route that Gabriel suggests, because there was a court order, and he was aware that the court order, and he was coming simply also to comply with the court order as well.
You know, that is Gabriel's route, and it's shared by many people who also think the same. But I like what Wakili George has explained here very, very well. Regardless of, for me, this is not even about Miguna's drama, by the way. For me, the focus is on the court and the government, the judiciary and the rest of government agencies. The judiciary has issued orders that he must be facilitated to come in spite of his drama. It is the judiciary that needs him. He is not coming here voluntarily. He is not coming here for his own sake. The judiciary has issued an order because they want to hear him on some cases that are still pending in court. So if you like, he's like property of the judiciary. They are saying, bring him here. He should have been facilitated by government even before arrival, because, you know, we have Kenyan embassy in Canada that could have issued temporary travel documents to him. We have a Kenyan High Commission in London, because he came to Kenya en route via London. He went to Germany, London, and then Dubai, and then Nairobi. He could have, those places have Kenyan embassies. If they respected the orders of the judiciary, it wouldn't take them even an hour to process temporary travel documents, to not because they're giving to Miguna or they're being courteous to him or they're doing him favors, but because they are respecting the order of the court. And once in, as George has said, if he has done any, for example, they're saying he's an undocumented person and he was showing us a Kenyan ID card in his name, then they can charge him with impersonation. They can say this fellow is showing around some ID card
and claiming
to be a Kenyan with the name Miguna. Then they charge him.
George?
That should
if I go around flashing a card and saying I'm Ugandan, let me in, Isn't it incumbent upon Ugandan authorities to actually take me in and interrogate how genuine my documents are?
That's what should have happened. Put it this way, you know, when in a position of might, there's a temptation, by the way, ordinarily to impose yourself. It's very obvious for everyone. That temptation is ordinarily a constant. And whether a policeman, whether at the level even a watchman at the gate, or a person at the highest office in the land, that temptation to the next person, if you have power of authority, will always be a constant. However, there's something we call wisdom. Wisdom is when you are challenged with two facets, two options that are both correct, or several. But you pick the most convenient, most economically viable, and one that serves the purpose. For instance, here, the person who makes this decision is supposed to serve Kenyans, not himself, not his ego, not his anger, not his emotions, not for purposes of repressing or addressing this irritant who shouts, who is uncouth, who is uncivil according to you. Now, when you look at the sum total of that, then what is the wisest thing in the circumstances to do? One is you have an obligation to obey a court order, because everyone in this country must respect the court order. Number two is that for purposes of the image that you create for your office, for purposes of image of the country, and the government itself, which again has issues to sort, many other issues to sort, you don't allow this then to be born into something that becomes dramatic, as he has put it. What you do is you execute it smoothly for whatever purposes, and then in the process, if the person has committed an offense, then it's not the fear of whether you're going to charge the person or not. Execute your mandate by charging the person. Because Miguna, I do know that there are certain areas that are omissions. And for many Kenyans that has happened. I said here that the issue of a passport, dual citizenship, has not been properly addressed in this. In fact, even for legal practitioners, many of them would not know where to start and where to stop when they are faced with a client who wants to address as to whether indeed he has dual citizenship or not. Many Kenyans out there have passports of other countries, and yet they have passports of this country in the previous constitution, which then admonished having a passport of another country, because then you have to come back and do your paperwork afresh. It didn't recognize dual citizenship. Now it does. So what needs to be done is a process of simple regularization. If you become a citizen of the US today, you must take an oath of allegiance. That is what should happen. It's a very small transaction which otherwise can be done. But this has turned out to be a big issue. In fact, we are discussing it for exact that purpose. For the reason that somebody somewhere refuses to see the bigger picture and goes for the narrow prism of the political aspect and the egoistic approach to this issue. It shouldn't be that way. If you serve a Kenyan, and a person who purports to be a Kenyan, first investigate him and hear him whether he's a Kenyan, and then deport him second. But you don't deport him, then you hear him.
Because the court can also order that he be deported.
That's exactly how it should be. First you hear him. Are you a Kenyan or not? He may not be a Kenyan because of the issues that I imagine. But first you hear him whether he's a Kenyan before you deport him. You don't deport him, then you hear him whether he's a Kenyan. And that's what the courts are saying. We need to hear him, and then we order him to be deported.
And the handling of this issue by state officials leaves a lot to be desired. You must admit.
It does. And, you know, like Wakili has rightly put it, there is that imbalance of, do you process him first? Do you deport him? So there is that element of an imbalance.
Look at the kind of resources.
And I agree. And I agree, Fred. But you see, Wakili also raises a very pertinent issue of the human mind, the ability to embrace convenience and that which will work at that particular moment. And when I read about this whole thing about Miguna, yes, even myself, we've been in a situation whereby we were advised back in the day that the new constitution is in play. There is something that you need to do extra for you now to regularize your citizenship. And we all agreed, and many Kenyans abroad went for it in Kenyan consulates and Kenyan embassies. So many people have actually gone through this particular element. And I've been asking myself, you know, Miguna at one point was an advisor to former Prime Minister Raila Odinga on constitution matters. We heard him the other day actually taunting that to the immigration officer, that he even was among the people who wrote the constitution. So Miguna knows better. And at one point I asked myself, is Miguna actually in custody? Has he been, has he been arrested, as he puts it? And one person put it very clear to me, an immigration official. He said, actually, Miguna has not been arrested. Miguna can walk out of this airport. All he needs to do is present his passport. The government has moved to ensure that he does. So you're looking at a matter of convenience, and like Wakili is saying, part of political drama. And I think, Fred, we've been treated to the latter. So much that half of the people don't know what is happening. Yes, I'm against any person, any institution, including the executive, going against court orders. Those must be the emblem of our law. But when it comes to really the convenience, so many people are asking this question. So many people are asking, who is right on this matter? So you're looking at a situation whereby you can easily bring all this imbalance to rest by just presenting your Canadian passport. And I find it very untruthful when somebody says the state or the country will hold to that passport. Wakili can tell you, I don't think any government is allowed to hold a foreign passport. They would have given it back to him, and the Canadian officials were there, from the Canadian High Commission. So this is something that would have done, that would have finished at the earliest convenience.
Okay, we still continue following that top story this morning, the deportation of Miguna. This is the second time the state is doing this. The first time they deported him to Canada. This time they forced him onto a plane. There were attempts to force him onto a plane earlier this week to Dubai. He vigorously rebuffed those attempts. Yesterday it appears the state was successful. They put him on a plane, Emirates Airline flight EK722 to Dubai. It was scheduled to land at 5:05 this morning. We have a text message from Miguna saying that yes, he is in Dubai as we speak. We continue looking at that. Plus, the other unfolding story that security chiefs face prison. High Court judge finds Interior CS Fred Matiang'i, Police Boss Joseph Boynet, and Immigration Chief Gordon Kihalangwa in contempt for disobeying court orders to free opposition activist Miguna. We'll continue that discussion after the break.